My name is Trassa Cadigan from One Young World, and I'd like to welcome our audience here and our digital audience sitting in online. Just a quick reminder, this afternoon's, or this morning's session, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So for our audience that are sitting here, you can raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone over to you. And for our digital audience, we will have a Slido code, and you can go onto slido.com and submit your questions. And without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the next session, Young People Adapting Their Lifestyle to Build a More Sustainable Future. And I would like to welcome on stage Rocío, Cacho Orts, Charles Baldaia and Emma de Saram. Thank you very much.
Hello. Oops. Hi. Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Rocío Cacho. I'm the head of events and media at My Life, My Say, which is a youth-led, non-partisan leading UK charity empowering young people to participate in democracy, especially those who are not fairly represented in politics. So our main goal is trying to make sure that they understand that politics is for everybody. It doesn't matter like your background, where you come from. Like politics is not for older people, because today decisions are being made that like really affect us, and we need to understand the power of our voice and the power of our words. So that's why it's very nice to be here with two young people today to discuss climate change, which is something that is going to affect young people for the rest of our lives, and we need to make sure that their voices are being heard. So our panel today is going to explore whether the current capitalist system fails to point out specific industries like the food sector, like fast fashion industry, that they really thrive at the expense of the climate and they're like provoking climate change. Then also, we're also going to explore whether young people, they have a moral duty and responsibility to change their lifestyle and the way they consume and live, and stop consuming products for those industries previously mentioned to make a more like livable world. So first, I'm going to briefly introduce our amazing panelists today. I'm so excited to be here with them today because I've known that I was going to be moderating this panel for a couple of weeks, and if you guys are excited, I'm buzzing right now. So first, we have Charles Baldaia. He's a 24-year-old international relations analyst and climate change activist. He's from Brazil. His family lived in the streets of Belo Horizonte, a city in Brazil, for a couple of years, and that really inspired him to make sure that marginalized voices, they are at the forefront of decision-making processes. And that's why he's here today with the NGO United for Climate Action. Then we have Emma de Saram. She's a 21-year-old social justice activist from North Dorset in the UK. She's also part of this youth-led organization called Green New Deal Rising. And she also advocates for like more sustainable food options at her university, Uni of Exeter. And she also organizes at the local level campaigns and litter picks. So I really wanted that first to you guys, if you can tell us why you became activists. What happened to you guys, and what did you learn that really make you consider, okay, I need to do something, I need to make my part, I need to get involved in activism. So either Charles or Emma, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Charles Baldaia. I just to become an activist, to be frank. I entered the international affairs studies because I felt it was the best way to contribute to my community. I am easy learning. I learn English by myself, and I felt like using my knowledge to represent my community would be the best. As I studied to become a diplomat, I came to realize that most times diplomats don't really have the opportunity to speak for their own minds. And that's why I became an activist, so I could speak and defend what I think is right, and be sure that the point of view of my family and my friends are heard in decision-making spaces.
I mean, my journey into activism, like I guess a lot of people's, is very multifaceted. But a couple of things happened to me. So I went through a period of being quite like mentally unwell, and I was kind of told like once you got better, the world was a great place, and you could experience new things. Then I came out and I got better, and I realised the world isn't a great place. So it kind of like spurred me on to make sure that people didn't have to experience kind of what I went through. And I've also like growing up in like a relatively like deprived area, and just kind of noticing how people's like personal injustices linked to a wider system, and then finding out more and reading about climate change, it kind of like all interlinked and made me just want to advocate for global and local social justice.
Lovely. And what do you guys think about this? Because I've been hearing a lot if that, like capitalism, we cannot save the planet if we still have that current system in place. But other people see and say that it's feasible. We can still live and consume the way we do if we have the system in place. What do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree?
I think that the way that the distribution system is placed right now is just unsustainable. We are producing enough food for everyone, but it is just being wasted away for monetary resource, for monetary reasons. And having hunger and having nothing to eat and literally working for people that throw food away, I can't describe the feeling of it. I can't describe how angry it makes you feel, And it is very sad to think that you can't really think of you feel like you don't have the power to change this because it's such a big structure. And I agreed with you. I think that it can't be social justice with this way in which we distribute the resources right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the capitalist system based on like perpetual growth. I mean, I studied economics, and the only graphs we ever learnt about were these ones. Where does that stop? Like, we can't keep going, but yet we've got this growth that doesn't take into account well-being, like unequal distribution. We cannot be continually growing, because where does that stop? And capitalism doesn't take into account like feeling. It just takes into account profit as a measure of success. Like this morning, the UK's GDP growth figures came out, and it's like, what does that mean anymore? Like, that means nothing. In a world where people are starving and people don't have a home, why is GDP a success? We can't put, like, that doesn't account for well-being, happiness, emotions. And at the end of the day, as much as we can be talking about climate change, we also need to be talking about how people are feeling. And capitalism doesn't allow for that, because it's just constantly about profit.
I certainly agree with you. And then sometimes, like, especially young people, I feel like there is a pattern in which we see, like, young people and youth climate change activists, that they really want world leaders to address that, and, like, don't be afraid of saying, maybe the current system is not working, maybe we could change something to make the world more livable. But then world leaders and then other people, they think, okay, we need to tackle climate change, but like, do not even mention that the system is not working. Like, do not even say that capitalism, it shouldn't be the answer, because that's very radical. So it makes you think, well, then how can we move forward? Because, like, I feel like at COP, I don't know if you guys agree, well, you've been here for like so many days, that it feels like there are like two groups. One group of like young people who really want to address that, and then the ones making decisions, they really don't think about that, which leads to my next question. When it comes to like industries that really pollute the planet, like when we like watch the news and like we read about climate change, it's always about clean energy, green energy. But then if you really like get an article, like a scholar article, and you start reading about maybe there are other industries that are really polluting the planet, like making climate change a thing, and it's making it very worse. For me, discovering about fast fashion and the food sector, because fast fashion accounts for 10% of the CO2 emissions, and the food sector, 26%. So why do you think that only world leaders, they're not acknowledging that, they're not addressing that? Because some people, when they don't really, like they're not very knowledgeable about the subject of climate change, they think that just turning, like switching our energy to green and sustainable energy, that's the answer and that should be it. And there are other things that they don't, like we shouldn't change. So why do you think that is?
In United for Climate Action, we talk a lot about we being present, we people from marginalized community being present in decision-making spaces and the importance of it. And I think that just talking about going green, it's not leading anywhere. And it's not leading anywhere because we are not part of the decision-making spaces. Even at COP, and this got me very frustrated because I worked very, very hard to get here, and I get to know these two different groups. I don't think it should be this way. Being part of the decision making, it's not something I need to conquer. It's my right, because the decisions that are being held at COP affects my life. And all the diplomats, at least from Brazil, all the diplomats, all the decision making, all the ministers, and even the president came from a very healthy family, a very rich family, and people from marginalized communities are not heard. So the discussions is only about deforestation of the Amazon or of the fashion, but for the majority of the Brazilian population, this is not even the biggest problem. We are starving to death, and people think that this is not a problem. People are not aware of how this is killing us. I think that for it to really make change, and for people for us to solve this problem, we need people from different communities to be in the decision making, and to change the way we produce and we consume. We need to be included in this kind of decision-making spaces.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear your perspective and how although we come from radically different parts of the world, our issues are intersecting. I think going back to what you said initially about this divide between, I guess it's people young activists, but people from marginalized communities, BIPOC people. For them, COP is so crucial. But then we have people, I see it, the difference between people who are coming to COP as their job, their paid job, and the people who have sacrificed to come to COP, and who, when they go home, they're not going back to comfort and security, but who are going home, and COP literally is so crucial. Young people, I was sitting with a bunch of Fridays for Future students, and we were just talking about how much schoolwork we had to catch up on when we go home. And that's our main sacrifice, but some people have sacrificed so much time, so much money, so much energy, emotional investment. Yeah, I feel the people who are making the decisions, there's no emotional investment there because they're going back to luxury, essentially. Yeah. And it's crazy, the fact that I've made small sacrifices, but nothing in comparison to so many people for whom this is so important. And I think going to fast fashion and consumption, I think yeah, it's so important that young people are obviously making the right changes, but sometimes I feel this discussion is just a massive distraction from actual what we need to be addressing. When we've got people when it's just the MAPA community it's just so severely affected, and we're talking in the global north about maybe we should stop eating so much environmentally damaging products and switch our clothes. Yeah, that's a great conversation to be having, and it's important, but we're not even at the point of cancelling debt, and there's so many more important issues that we need to be addressing. And I think also that the fast fashion consumption, that's still within the framework of capitalism. Like that's still, we're having like these debates about what should we be consuming rather than let's look at the broader picture, why we've got to this. Because also we can't like just instantly stop consuming fast fashion and like selling like beef burgers and stuff, because we've got to think like who's producing them, and it's all this thing about like a just transition out of these industries. We can't just initially like switch from renewables, to renewables, switch to sustainable fashion, because you've got to think like who's being left behind in that transition. So it's not just like, okay, let's stop doing this. And also it's really dangerous because a lot of companies now are catching onto the climate bandwagon and they're like greenwashing the hell out of stuff. Like I was walking down this morning and McDonald's had like a sign outside saying, we're producing biofuel. And then people are going to go in there thinking like they're more like, you know, and it's fine because we're all like victims of this horrible system. And they're going to be thinking they're making a good decision, but they're not. Because the system won't allow it. And we just need to be thinking first, let's get to a broad level where everyone is fed properly, everyone is homed, then we can move on to like next things.
Absolutely. And I feel as well that, you know, like these world leaders, they know that those industries, they're harming the environment. But it's so frustrating because they know, and then when they're, you know, in the blue zone, you know, like delivering these speeches and like talking about how like we need to be, you know, like come all together and like fight climate change. And then you're expecting them to mention these industries and understand, okay, we need to change how we buy, how we consume, because that might be a factor in this, and they don't, then it makes you feel like, so how do we move forward? Like, why is it only me thinking that we should change this, but then the people who are making decisions, they don't? So I feel like that's why it's so important that we have people like you, young people that understand that if they don't acknowledge and they don't address that, we're not gonna have like a planet, a world to live in. And then also you acknowledge a little bit as well the justice and like climate justice and social justice part of climate change. So obviously fast fashion, it's not the best social justice place, you know, and we've seen many corporations and many companies saying that we, you know, like we're doing a great job by like tackling climate change, but then these people, they do modern slavery today, which obviously we cannot think of climate justice without social justice. So do you think when these two, like the food sector and the fast fashion industries, do you think that we can tackle climate change with those industries by also changing how they treat and they deal with workers, with their workers? Or do you think that that's not feasible? Like those two industries, you know, as long as they act how they're acting, we're not going to be able to have social justice in those industries.
So I thought a lot about this question, and I think that the key factor that need to be addressed is that for these corporations, I'm not a consumer. It's very hard for me to talk about the consuming industry because I'm not a consumer. The fashion and the food industry are not made for me. I am a worker. So they do not treat me like someone who can spend money, but someone that they can exploit, you know. And this needs to be addressed, and this needs to be made very clear, not only to the decision making, but to the environmental activists. You know, that we are not at the same page, we are not in the same boat. You are treated like consumers and you need to find ways to better consume. This is your part. I am seen like a worker. You know, my type of activism, it's different because I'm treated different. My part inside of the system is different. And I saw in in my whole life, because there's a lot of NGOs came into my community. I'm from a Brazilian favela, and they try to help us, which is very great, but they do not include us in the decision making of how to help us. So they always tackle the wrong issue. I remember that time that an NGO came to the favela and teach us how to recycle. and they give us like this different trash cans for us to separate the trash, which was awesome, and we did. But there is not like when the trash man came, they threw it all in the same thing and nothing happened. You know, if they could talk to us and ask us what it was the problem, we will say to them that we do not have the means to recycle at the first point. And I feel that we are having the same problem with fashion and food making, is that the consumers are taking the lead of this movement and are not talking to us, talking about what are our problems and how can we work together to make this change. And this kind of conversation is very important so we can all be at the same page.
Yeah. I think as consumers, especially in the global north and in like wealthy countries, we do have a big responsibility and we have a lot of power, like our purchasing power and calling out companies, like boycotting companies. There was a lot around like Puma, like boycotting around like Palestinian liberation. And I think like as consumers, we vote with our purchasing, and we do have like a lot of responsibility to boycott like damaging companies and call them out and hold them accountable, because at the end of the day, like they will listen to us. But at the same time, I think what you said about like, you know, can we get climate justice within like, you know, with the fast fashion industry, with like the food industry, I think it's the idea that we can solve this, like in the global north I'm specifically talking about, is very like neo-colonial, thinking that like, okay, we've caused these problems, we can solve them. We need to just empower, you know, you're talking about these NGOs coming in and this very like white saviorism kind of thing. And it's not for us, like COP, to go and solve the problem. We got you into this mess and we're not going to get you out of it. We need to be about empowering and providing agency, not charity. Like indigenous, I've learned so much being at the People's Summit and like indigenous solutions, like nature-based solutions and all that kind of stuff. And like indigenous people's communities, especially women, like empowering women, that's where the solutions are. So let's think about redistributing, empowering, and thinking locally. And I think that's what we need to get back to. Like, obviously, I'm not going to turn this into a broader critique of globalization, but we do need to be thinking reducing food miles. So I come from like Blandford Forum, and the cafe I work at, he's brought out this new thing, like a traffic light system about how far the food has come. Maybe let's go back to just thinking local solutions, but obviously we need to like get there first. Thinking locally, but providing global justice.
Yeah, I think, you know, especially people who didn't link social justice with climate justice, when you really start to know, like, understand the intersection of it, it really makes you think, like, you know, like, how many people out there, they just think that climate change is just changing, you know, like, how many plastic bottles we buy. Or, you know, like, oh, I don't want a plastic bag, or I'm just gonna carry my grocery shopping with me, and that's it, I've done my bit, without, you know, like, speaking up and realizing that there's a wider structure that are, you know, like, creating climate change. And I've been told, well, you guys told me that you've been here, you know, in Glasgow for a couple of days already. You've been here for like 2 weeks. Yeah. So I wanted to ask, you know, as young people that we are, how do you feel about, you know, like world leaders, like older people saying to us, come on, like, you are changing the world, you know, like, oh, you turned vegetarian, you gave up meat, that's so interesting, like, I wouldn't be able to do that, but you are gonna change the world. Or like, oh, I'm not like consuming fast fashion, like, I'm gonna go to like secondhand store and I'm just gonna buy clothing. Oh, you're so brave, that's great. But then, you know, when you're really trying not to consume from those industries because you think you have a duty. And, you know, it's maybe like the only way that you can contribute to this, you know? Like, if you're not making decisions, you know, like as world leaders, then maybe you're like, okay, maybe I might have to change the way I consume, the way I behave. But then, don't you think that's unfair on us because, you know, sometimes when I'm like, okay, I really love Coca-Cola, by the way, and sometimes I'm like, do I really want to consume from this corporation that are like really polluting the world? Sometimes I make an exception. I buy my Coke, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna sip it and enjoy this moment. And then there are people who are like, oh, you shouldn't, you know, like, you shouldn't because you really say that Coca-Cola, you know, they're polluting the world. Why are you drinking that Coke? They start like shaming me. So then it's like, is it, you know, like an unfair pressure put on like only young people?
This is so white people. I mean, I had this conversation before, and what I feel is that you are focused on the wrong issue, you know? I'm a big fan of Billie Eilish, and he says that, and in your power, that you might not want to lose your power, but heaven is so strange. You know, heaven, knowing that you are a person that are welfare and you have the power to change things, it's very strange, and you don't want to lose it. But what I feel is that most of you are using it to tackle the wrong issue. It's not about you drinking Coca-Cola or not. It's not about you buying a top you like or not, you know. I am a marginalized guy from a poor community with a lot of ambition, but I cannot make it by myself. I just came here because people help me. You know, I feel like you have the power to help people around you. This is how you make change, you know. Even in the simplest things like inviting me to talk and stopping, coming into and listen what I have to say and really listen to it. Follow us on social media and help us in the crowdfunding to get to COP next year. These are meaningful ways to help with the climate change. You talk about the world leaders and our participation at COP, and I feel the same complex inside of COP right now. We were invited to a lot of events. It was given to us like 1 minute to speak, and we stood there. We are included, but not in a meaningful way. You know, we need to be heard. We need we need you to stop and listen to us. And more important of all, we need the opportunities to do so. You spoke about this white savior complex, and I want you to know that I don't need to be saved. I need the opportunity to save myself. I have the strength and the power to do so, but I don't have the opportunity to, and you can help me with that. I think that's the best way to do that.
I don't know how to follow that. So we're talking about this pressure being put on young people, and I feel that because I hate this discourse of, wow, you're doing all this amazing stuff, and it's great. And yeah, we are great, and we have a lot of energy, like the youth movement. Like, I felt it so much. I was here from Thursday till Monday doing activist stuff on the outside of COP, which was just so empowering. And then I head into, like, the blue zone, and I just feel completely small fish. Like, getting barged. Like, I've got my yellow pass on. Like, people look at your yellow pass because it means you're an observer. And they look at you, and they just push past you. Like, I literally, like, got pushed out of the way, like, elbowed by these, like, white guys. And, no. So I think it's about not being tokenistic in including like young people and people of colour in the conversation. It's about actually granting power and listening. And in terms of like individual choice versus system change, like I see individual choice as like a consciousness raising method of collective action. So like when you get your like canvas bag as opposed to your plastic bag, I think the more and more people do that and do these individual choices, they may connect it to a bigger system. So I see like all those like progressive actions as obviously like positive, and we need to do them and like be talking about them. But I think the way we're going to get climate justice isn't through like just being perfectly zero waste and sustainable. Because I think there are pressure on environmental activists, particularly. Like, I feel it. Like, I put on my Instagram story, guys, I just went to Primark. Like, I exposed myself, because it's not about being perfectly perfect, because that in itself is incredibly just very selfish and individualized. Like, that's not the way we're going to do it. It's about joining local community groups, and we can all do it. Like, I've got the privilege, like the time privilege, and luckily, like, although I'm not able to really like do my part-time job anymore because I've literally just taken on environmental activism, it's about just spending that extra time we have and using the privilege and the voice we have. Like, we've probably all got social media, like using it properly, like using it to encourage these conversations and talk about what we're doing, and joining community groups. Because we've all got like groups of people in our towns who all are thinking about something, and it's about building that up and using that collective pressure, because at the end of the day, people like together, like we won't be defeated. People united will not be defeated. And it's about finding those local groups and joining them and helping them and having these conversations to enable people and like talk about people of like what people of colour are saying, and to do that collective action. Because as much as we can do these individual things, we've got to think, why are we doing it? Is it for me, or is it because this is going to lead to something bigger? And I think we should all be trying to choose the latter.
I agree 100%. I feel like, I think you're a vegetarian as well, or you're vegan?
Vegan, yeah.
Vegan. So when people say that, or like, oh, you're vegetarian, you're vegan, but then, you know, like maybe one day you need, or you have to like consume like animal products. When they shame you, that's when you feel like, wow, like, have I like made people think like, I'm not making them proud. Am I making myself proud for like, you know, like trying to change everything about myself, how I consume, how I work, what I do. But then when you really need to resource to that stuff, it's like, have I been defeated by, you know, like the system itself? So I feel like, and when they say that, they're not addressing social justice. You know, like not everybody can afford being vegan, or like being vegetarian, or like not consuming beef, or like not going to Primark, as you said, you know. I feel like sometimes, and obviously in the beginning I did that, of like, wow, if I was able to, you know, like quit animal products, everyone can. And it's like a bit of like, wow, so you kind of like, because it's a part of like desperation act of like, if we all change the way we, you know, like we consume and we live, that's it, like climate change is sorted. But then you don't address that not everybody can do that. So I feel like the main point as well would be understanding that the life choices, you know, like the consuming choices that we make, they have, you know, like a meaning, and they are being successful. However, if not everybody do that, it's fine. Everybody's doing their best with everything that they have and they can. So I wanted to ask, because you two, you're very, you know, like you're a climate activist and that's your job. How do you feel, you know, about like the role that young people, that the youth, they have in the climate change movement?
Okay. My point of view of the participation of youth in the climate movement have changed a lot in COP26. I worked very hard to be here. For a long time, it was my final destination. It was all I ever wanted. And I had a terrible, terrible experience at COP26 in my first week. And what I came to realize is that this kind of decision-making spaces are not ready for me, because they are not made for young people, especially people from marginalized communities. And I knew that it was this way about the conversations, such as going vegan or not. This is a conversation that is not prepared for me, because my question is not about going vegan or not, it's about having food or not at the first place. And where this food came from and how is it made, it's a next step. And it's very hard for me to say these things because I don't want you to feel like, all the work, because I know it's very hard to go vegan and to go vegetarian. I don't want you to feel like it is useless, because it makes difference. It makes the way that the producing system it's designed. It makes it changed, you know. But if you do not take into account the reality of others, it can be bad for us, because if vegan food and more sustainable food are more expensive to make, you know. And can you imagine if all the healthy go vegan, and the food that it's already very hard for us to get will get even expensive. It is insane. You cannot talk about the food, the produce system without talking about social justice and about people having access to food in the first place. This cannot be separate things. Otherwise, you're leaving people behind, and you're using the power you have only for yourself. You talked about if I can go vegan, everyone can go. And I ask, who is this everybody? Are your friends and family? Because I bet they can, but I don't know if we can.
Yeah. So the role of young people, and I'll just touch on like the vegan thing. I mean, I don't really like to talk about it because this thing, again, it's like a big distraction. Like for me, it's a personal choice because I think like the meat and everything that I would be able to afford isn't necessarily sustainable, because there's a big difference between eating sustainably and going vegan, because often like my big fear is that we have this like white veganism thing, and it's like vegan capitalism. So it's like big companies like McDonald's and Burger King bringing out a vegan burger, which is still like as environmentally destructive. And we can maybe, what will happen is we'll switch, and instead of mass producing like beef, which is like very damaging, we'll start employing people to mass produce tofu and still treat those workers awfully. So like we can, like, just because it's vegan, it doesn't mean it's necessarily sustainable or socially or morally, ethically better. And like when I say I'm vegan, it's not some like, look at me, I'm, you know, because that's just inherently corrupt. Like that's just problematic. I think we need to be switching to sustainable food choices, like treating the people who produce our food properly, and making it local. And the role of young people, I think young people aren't a homogenous group. If we're talking young people where I live or like the global north, maybe we have like more time privilege, but again, it's not homogenous. Like I've got a bit of privilege and a bit of time privilege, and I'm lucky like to be able to like take the time to come to COP, etc. And all I know is that I've just got to catch up on a bit of work. Like you've sacrificed so much. Like young people aren't a homogenous group, and we need to be advocating where we have the privilege for other young people who are like suffering the worst of climate change, and like social, economic, racial injustices. So again, like when young people are spoken about, we've got to remind ourselves that age isn't the only differential, and we need to have intersectionality within young people. And I think we often talk about intersectionality, and then we also talk about young people in the climate movement, and it's like, well, let's bring those two things together again, because age differential is another, you know, something that divides us, you know? Yeah. So yeah, again, young people, we're not all the same people. We're different. So yeah.
Okay, and before we go for the Q&A session, I wanted to last ask you both if you can share with all of us one very happy moment that brought you either like happiness, pride, joy as an activist. It can be, you know, during your lifetime, or maybe since you've been here at COP, or like since you've been involved in activism.
Wow.
Sorry, it was not in the briefing that I sent you. I hope that's okay.
That's okay, that's okay. As I said, I was very disappointed with COP. At the first week, it was very, very hard. And I even thought of quitting COP. I am again from United for Climate Action. We are an organization. We brought 17 people from marginalized communities inside COP with our own money. We raised our money. We even brought translators for people who can not speak English to be included in this kind of conversations. And I have this friend and also colleague. He's from Colombia. His president went to COP and lied about how climate activists are traded into Colombia. And he spoke to me and said how frustrated he was that he did not have the power to say to his face and say to everyone he was lying. And like at the fourth or fifth day of COP, he managed to go like face to face to his president, surrounded by the press, and pointed at his face and say he was lying. It was amazing. I cannot describe how happy I was. And I saw the video and I was like, I got his badge. It was awesome, 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 awesome. I think that's the power of our being here. You know, if we do not had him inside of COP26, this leader would just go away with his lie. You know, because we are here, we have the power to say to his face that he's lying, and I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, COP has been wild, and being inside that blue zone is just very disempowering. But I think my happiest moment has just been meeting people, like activists that I'd kind of interacted with over lockdown online. And I think the best bit was yesterday we did an action outside the plenary. So it's a bunch of us just shouting, like truth to power. And I think that has been the best bit, just 15 minutes of pure chanting inside of COP. Because, as you say, it's not designed for young people, and we have to be radical because that's the only way we're going to get heard. If we're not shouting, we're not going to get heard. So that felt just...
I bet that was powerful, both of those situations. So I'm just gonna ask the audience if anybody has any questions for these two brilliant activists about, you know, like their role in activism. But if not, we are gonna take questions from the people watching us from home. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about like kind of there being expectations when you like start labeling yourself as like a climate activist and being like more involved with these problems. And like for example, I'm vegetarian because for dietary reasons I can't have products such as, or I can't have large amount of products such as soy and stuff. But I feel like I literally had a latte earlier and I felt so guilty. I was like, oh my God, I'm not like getting soy milk. And I think I want to be involved, but like one of the most scary aspects of that is just feeling like I'm gonna have to justify myself constantly to other people. And I just wanted to know how you guys like, because I'm sure like you've both faced it, like people kind of being like, oh, like you want to care for the climate, but you're not doing this and this. Like, how do you respond to those sort of like, the people saying those things to you? I just, was wondering.
I think that this way of trying to make change and feeling guilty, it's part of the consumption system. You know, you are never guilty about your own values, but how people perceived you. You know, it's you, instead of having a Coca-Cola, having a neutral zero Coca-Cola. I mean, what's the difference? And I know I understand that it's very hard to like be thinking about this way, but I would encourage you to think of other ways to contribute for taking the system to changing the way we consume things. Change your consumption behavior are very keen and very powerful, but you have other ways to do that as well. So don't feel that guilty to drink dailies. You can you can help in other ways too, in case you feel that guilty, and we'll be very happy if you do so.
And can I answer as well? Yeah. It's great to hear that like you're even thinking about it and like wanting to take action, and like especially for me, like being vegan is something I've had to justify so many times, and I feel like I've just rehearsed the same conversations with family, friends, and other people, and it's like if someone is, you got to think, is this internal? Like, are these things that I'm just making myself feel awful for? Or are people actually thinking it? And I think if people are actually saying that to you, or if they're criticizing anything progressive you're trying to do, like, that's not cool. And there are like so many other ways that you can like get on board. Like, you don't need to be perfectly vegan or anything. Like, the best banana muffin I had, it turned out it wasn't vegan. This was like a couple of months ago, and it's like, well, okay, that's cool, move on, you know? If we're spending our like mental energy on things like little things like that, it's not going to get us anywhere. It's about doing what you can and individualizing it, because, you know, we can't all like sustain ourselves on a perfectly like plant-based diet. So it's not about feeling like guilty for anything, because you've got to look after yourself too. In all these conversations, I think something as like activists we don't talk about is how we're feeling, and like self-care and looking after like our close loved ones. Like, I haven't seen like my dad and my half brother and half sister for a very long time, because I've been busy at the weekends doing like this, that and the other. And I think like before we look at the global, we do need to make sure we're looking after like our kin and ourselves, because like love and all that kind of stuff, like that's what's also going to help us with all this.
I agree. Does anybody else have another question? Oh, wow. That's
Really, really great points. I keep hearing that this is the most inclusive COP yet. I went into the Blue Zone on Monday, and it was not, right? There were so many old white men in blue suits. It was crazy. So what are your thoughts on that statement, this is the most inclusive?
It was pretty shocking for me, because I get into the venue and I saw a lot of black people and people from different countries, and I was very hopeful. I really think that we are inside of COP, but not in a meaningful way. You know, when it came to taking decisions, and I'm not able to be at the negotiations. I'm not allowed to speak for my country. I'm just allowed to sit and watch. Is this being inclusive? I don't think so. So from now on, I mean, United for Climate Action had this mission of being inside of decision-making spaces, but from now on, we are working to make this presence meaningful. We want to have a voice, and I think that's the key point. Thank you for bringing this question.
Yeah, I just think, small point, I just think it's incredibly tokenistic. Any of the inclusive like discourse, it's just incredibly tokenistic. Like, we're putting people on a stage, and even with young people, I feel like it's sometimes happening inside of COP. Like, you're being put on a stage and you're there, but it's like, well, what power do you actually have? I think the most inclusive parts of COP have been the coalition events. That's where I've learnt the most. Like the fringe events, which aren't officially part of the Blue Zone, but where like people have travelled far just to get their voices heard, because for so many people, this is like life and death. This isn't just like another UN conference. This is their lives. So I think, the inclusive discourse. Even like I'm like a white woman, but I just do feel like so weird going in, and I just got like men in like white cisgendered men in suits. Like, they're not going to save us. They got us into this mess. They're not going to get us out of it.
Yeah, it feels like as if you didn't belong. It's like, I'm an expert on climate, and pretty sure, well, I'm talking about you guys, not me. But then these world leaders, they're like saying all this stuff that maybe they don't even understand what they're talking about, but it was just, they're just there reading this piece of paper, and they think that that's it, like their job is done. So yeah, I feel like it's not inclusive whatsoever.
And it's so frustrating, because I'm right there. Just ask me.
Yeah. They should like ask you.
And they're getting paid to do it. They're getting literally paid. Like, this is your job. This is not our jobs. Like, We are students. We have stuff to do, but yet we're sacrificing a lot of time to be here. This is your job, and you're not doing it properly, and that's why we're here.
You guys are the real leaders, not them.
Watch me.
You had a question?
Hello. I was just wondering how we can continue to hear your voices. Like, what kind of channels do you use, and how can we just keep hearing what you have to say?
I have social network, Baldaia Charles, every single network, social network you can imagine. I don't know if we can show it later. And of course, United for Climate Action also, I can share with all of you if you want to.
Yeah, I'm just Emma de Saram. Luckily, no one has taken my handles on Instagram, so it's just Emma de Saram. And if you want to join, I'll speak to you after, but Green New Deal Rising is a UK-based one, but looking global Green New Deal that is like a people's Green New Deal.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, wow.
Right, I think we can take some of the questions we got from our online audience. We have Florian who's asking, you mentioned the lack of engagement from young people. So how do we make sure, what made you decide to become an activist? What was the kind of the moment in your life that you decided, I want to take action? And also at the same time is, how do we make our new, I'm just paraphrasing here. How do we make young people also engaged?
I think social media can be a beautiful thing. I think it's about connecting with other young people in your area or online, on just getting on board with a collective movement. So depending on where you are based, obviously in the UK I know a lot of campaign groups, but it's searching out local people who are interested in something you care about. I mean, the moment for me has also been, I've been really influenced by some other friends who really engaged with activism, because there's this connect between recognizing an issue, how do I take action? And I think it's searching out for something on, the internet can be a beautiful thing, searching out for it and joining it and just turning up, because you will find your tribe, and then you can get other people on board.
And for me it was, last year we have a lot of talks with leaders from Germany, and we had to talk with a minister. I don't really remember who it was. But I was speaking about how important it was to support people in Brazil and how much we needed her help. And she said to me, I've been in Brazil once, I don't think you need help, because the person I've been in his house has a helicopter inside of his house. And I was like, do you know that not everyone has a helicopter? This is not reality. And this is the way, this was the moment in which I felt that we are not being really represented in the world. The people who has the duty and the job, who is being paid for representing Brazil, are not my people. They don't know about how it is to be at my place. And we are like a huge majority of Brazil. And then it inspires me to be here and to use my voice to expose our reality to as many people as I can, and to try to make change to my community.
That person is shocking, because those are the ones making the decisions. And that's when you realize that this cannot go on like that. So, yeah.
I mean, look at our Prime Minister, flying here, there and everywhere, to and from COP. You're flying to a climate change conference. Grow up.
Just take a train just for this one, so you avoid, the hate and all the comments, but they don't.
Before COP26, our project was sailing to go to Germany. Just want to say that we just went to sailing from Colombia to Germany, but, coronavirus, we had to stop in the middle of the ocean and go back home.
And yeah, it's these sacrifices. Last weekend, I was at the G20, and I know that pretty much all the world leaders flew to Rome. I took the blooming train. It was long, but I made the most of that journey. I read, and hopefully, maybe if the world leaders spent a bit of time reading up about climate change and social injustice on a train journey, might help them out a bit.
Honestly, yeah, it's like when they're within Europe and I'm just gonna take a 35 minutes flight. It's so frustrating. You're like, am I even considering taking the train that is gonna take 9 hours when you cannot just spare a few hours of your day? Yeah, very disempowering. You have a question?
I think that for a lot of people, especially during this COP, and from people that I've followed on Instagram and on social media, everybody came into COP with so much hope. Like I know myself, I did. The 2 weeks ago, I only came here a couple of days ago, but when COP started, everybody had so much hope, and I think that this year has been so many people I follow on social media and activists and even politicians have left early, and you yourself said you had a moment that you were saying that you don't want to be at COP anymore because everybody's left so, I don't know, not depressed, but just I feel gutted. I feel like I've lost my hope, and I'm just wondering where you think now that hope lies, that where we can still find it and where we're hopefully going to find action, I think is my big question.
Very good question.
I think as activists, we need to change the narrative of like, oh, COP was really depressing and it wasn't great because like, and obviously it wasn't going to like save the world, because if we've got these policymakers, yeah, we've got like a bit of inclusivity, but tokenistic inclusivity. I think this narrative that COP was going to save us is inherently just wrong. And I think as activists, like for me, I'm going to just try and change the narrative because it's all about like the story. Like, this is just part of the story of like how we're going to make a better future. And I think, like, yeah, although, like, maybe like, the policy might be horrendous, I think I've met a lot of people, amazing people and activists, and we've, like, us on the outside, we can just build our movement and, like, bring that hope through the collective action that we've been able to foster throughout this weird journey. Like, although, like, yeah, COP isn't great, it never was going to be great because of the very infrastructure it was functioning within. So I think we need to just build these connections even stronger and get out on the streets, like mobilizing in our communities and hold on to just those friendships.
So I'm again from a very poor community in Brazil, from a favela, and I always felt like I did not have the power to change things. That's the main thing that drives me to go into international affairs, because I felt like it was a structural system. And I strived very, very hard to be here. And for me, I felt like once I got to COP, I'll have the power to change things. And in my second or third day of COP, I suffered a racial assault inside of COP. And I was hopeless because I expected this place to welcome me and for me to make change. And instead of it, it was expelling me out. And I felt hopeless because if not inside COP, then where could I make the changes? And 2 or 3 days after this happened, and I've been like wandering around Glasgow, all devastated. This episode with my friend and his president happened, and I realized that, yeah, this is the place to make the changes. What I feel that is the future is that decision-making spaces are not ready for people like me. But I will not going back. I will make this space safe for people like me. So brace yourselves.
And we will do everything we can to make this space better for you and bring you into our decision making.
Yeah, when I talk about you having power to change things, is that the kind of things I'm talking about? For me, it's very hard to make change because I don't have the resources to do so. I don't have the tools to do so, but you do. And you don't need to scream at the face of a president. I'm sure that you know someone you have someone you know that has ambition, that wants to go somewhere but do not has the tools to do so. If you can help them, it's already changed a life of a person and can change the whole system. Do not underestimate the power you have.
I think coming away from this, like some people have asked, like, what can we kind of do? They've alluded to that. I think you all know one person. You can all have one conversation. They'll have a conversation, and together we'll do some bits. We'll do some good stuff.
I was gonna say, when you were saying, you know, like, how can I change the world? I feel like you have already changed stuff just by being here today. You know, like, you've changed my perception of climate change. You know, like you have added something to my knowledge that I'm gonna keep very close to my heart, both of you. So as Emma said, you know, like it's not about, you know, like waking up one day and overnight everything is perfect. It's more about, I had this beautiful conversation, empowering conversation with someone else yesterday, and I'm pretty sure that person is gonna use what I said and it's gonna create a chain of hope.
Yes, and I would like to add that I'm not the clever boy from my community. There's a lot of people that can contribute way more than I can. I just happen to be the one who could learn English by myself and be here and speaking to you. There's a lot of people that needs to be included in this kind of decision making. So the fight does not stop here. I really hope that we can make some change together.
Of course. Are we gonna take any other question from the live audience? Or, I mean, I'm just asking, or are we, yeah, you have a question?
I was just wondering, I found it quite interesting you're saying about capitalism is part of the problem. Do you have any thoughts about how we can move away from capitalism within our society and some alternatives that we could aim for?
Okay, now, talking as international affairs specialist and someone who study economics, change this system, like a whole revolution, it's very unlikely, to be frank. My dad said to me a lot about the whole society that you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And I know that the better way would be to change the whole system, but I do not think that this is very feasible. It's just my personal opinion. And you have ways to work inside of capitalism to change stuff, and that's what we are here trying to find ways to change things inside of here. I don't want what are.
Yeah, I mean, like, we don't have the solution, but I mean, I'm a history student, I study revolutions, and it's been done before. But I think we can switch to things like a well-being economy, including, like, yeah, well-being within our measures of economic success. And I think it's about creating, like, movements which will challenge capitalism and resist it. And just resist, like, the horrible parts of it. And I think slowly we can move to a sustainable, like, donut economics you might have heard of, thinking about how we can reuse resources, treat people properly who are producing those resources, and then eventually we will resist the worst bits of capitalism and hopefully overcome it.
Yeah, I feel like it shouldn't be on us. You know, like even if we actually had a new alternative and we could go out to the world leaders and say, this is what we should do, would they even listen? Like, even like they use that argument of like, what is the alternative? Even if I gave you that one, you wouldn't care. But it's, you know, as you guys are doing, like your job is like spreading the word so many people like us can really understand climate change and the intersectionality and everything behind the system itself, social justice, gender, etc. So, well, thank you so much for being here today with us. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much, Charles and Emma, for being here today. A big round of applause for them.